the President of the Association of Siamese Architects under Royal Patronage, Chairman of Architect Expo 2021, ASA Forum 2021 Chairperson, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, all of our participants that are watching from all around the world, สวัสดีค่ะ My name is Sarita Chusi, and it is my great pleasure to join ASA Forum 2021. And on behalf of the Association of Siamese Architects under Royal Patronage, we would like to welcome all of you to ASA Forum 2021. Under the name of ASA Forum of Architect 21 in New Normal, seeing all our participants' safety, that is our first priority. The Association of Siamese Architects under Royal Patronage will host ASA Forum in an online platform. For the first time, the famous lectures from UNESCO award-winning heritage architects, designers, and heritage building conservation specialists from across the world. They're all available for architects and the public for free. ASA Forum has been conducting using online platform throughout 2 days event, starting from today, the 26th, and tomorrow on the 27th of June as the second day. ASA will offer 7 sessions, and just like always, ASA Forum is packed with insights and knowledge on heritage architecture, making it possible for architects and public around the world to engage in real time under the unifying theme of Refocus Heritage. All participants here may register watching us here from ASA Forum via our online channel. You can log on to the website worldwideweb.asa.expo.org/forum-2021. Or you can also use your Facebook here. So log on to your Facebook and then facebook.com/ASA Architect Exposition. And apart from that here, if you log on to our website, you can switch to another language here by selecting the channel, both of Thai and original sound in English. Apart from that, you can also log on to YouTube and search for ASA channel, which you can also enjoy our 2 days event as well. Well, for now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to proceed to our opening ceremony. And I would like to invite Mr. Chana Sampalang, the President of the Association of Siamese Architects under Royal Patronage, to deliver a welcoming speech to all of us. Please welcome.
Dear distinguished speakers, honored guests, and all forum participants. My name is Chana Sampalang, President of the Association of Siamese Architects under Royal Patronage. It is my honor to welcome everyone to the forum. ASA Forum 2021 Refocus Heritage in the New Normal. The disruptive impacts of the coronavirus pandemic are extensive, which forced many careers, business to adapt in order to operate in a situation. Such as this architect is also one of the professionals that need to adjust and change the way they work due to current circumstances. The Association of Siamese Architects under Royal Patronage, as an organization responsible for promoting, driving the architectural profession to flourish continuously and sustainably, has organized various of events to promote the potential of Thai architects and has created a network to support business operations, such as organizing the Architect Expo, which is the largest exhibition for innovation in architecture and building material in Asia. This exhibition is held annually to present the potential of Thai design and construction industry on an international level. Regarding this year, ASA Forum 2021, the Association of Siamese Architects under Royal Patronage has recognized the significance of coronavirus situation and has taken into account the safety of all participants. Therefore, this year, ASA Forum has been truly adjusted to be an online format which for the first time is available for all architects and the general public to attend and listen to interesting discussion from architects, designers, and heritage conservationists from different countries who have come to share and discuss the subject for heritage. The Association of Siamese Architects under royal patronage would like to specially thank all of the distinguished speakers from various countries who have come to share their perspective on the architectural profession that can help preserve heritage in new way. Please join us to open up new perspective together in ASA Forum 2021. Thank you and สวัสดีครับ
Thank you very much once again there from Mr. Chana Sampalang, the President of the Association of Siamese Architects under royal patronage. And now, all participants that are watching online here, I would like to invite Dr. Montira Unakun, ASA Forum 2021 Chairperson, to deliver an opening remark. Please join us, Dr. Montira, via our online platform.
My name is Montira Unakun, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today at the opening of the ASA Forum, which is a long-awaited event that we have been planning since 2 years ago. Unfortunately, the chairman of the entire ASA 21 organizing committee, Dr. Wasut Boslianan, was not able to join us today due to personal reasons. And I would like to share some of the remarks that he has prepared for this opening event, particularly on our theme, which is Refocus Heritage. Refocus Heritage is the issue that has been selected as the theme of the ASA Expo that was initially planned to be organized in 2020. The Association of Siamese Architects under royal patronage considers that architecture, in the context of sustainable development, which is the major global trend, also concerns the use and adaptive use of architectural and cultural heritage to serve the present and future benefits. Nonetheless, the issue on heritage has actually never been used as a theme of the ASA Expo before, although Thailand is a country of long history and rich culture, along with many other neighboring countries in the ASEAN region. So it is within this context that this year, ASA now invites us all to refocus our views on heritage and to see how it is important not only for sustainable development, but also for meaningful design. And now I'd like to share a few additional words on my own behalf, which is in the context of the current COVID-19 pandemic, which has made us realize our vulnerabilities and also to identify what our core values are. Heritage in all of its forms, encompassing cultural heritage and natural heritage, is one of these core values. And so reorienting our future growth strategies to ensure that heritage is a central part of our future is essential. As part of the global community's commitment to heritage, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes heritage as a driver to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable under the Sustainable Development Goal number 11. To do so requires recognizing heritage as being dynamic, with immense potential to contribute to economic, social, and environmental well-being. So this ASA Forum brings together some key players who have been recognized by the prestigious UNESCO Asia Pacific Awards for Cultural Heritage Conservation, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, as well as ICOMOS. They will together discuss how to pivot our practice in the area of heritage and design. They will also share insights on how to place heritage at the heart of our sustainable urbanization and development. In this regard, we are very pleased and honored to have with us a series of some of the leading thinkers and practitioners in the area of heritage and design from the region. We have Mr. Laurence Loh from Malaysia, Mr. Alan Croker from Australia, Mr. Seung Yeal You from Korea, Mr. Saif Al-Haq from Bangladesh, Pawa Architects, as well as Shama, who will be joining us, as well as Dr. Mario Santana Quintero, Secretary General of ICOMOS International, who will be joining us tomorrow. So with many thanks to the ASA organizing team and also to the audience members from all around the world, I now welcome you to the ASA Forum and look forward to engaging with you over the next 2 days. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ
Thank you very much once again from Dr. Montira Unagun, ASA Forum 2021 chairpersons. And for now, before we go on with our first sessions, I'd like to inform all of our honorable participants that are watching from online platform. So all the handouts and the documents here regarding ASA Forum are available on the website. And all participants there are invited to send questions through our Q&A chat box. So at the end, after all the sessions are finished, we'll have the last sessions as a live Q&A where we'll have our international speakers joining along with our moderator in that sessions as well. So please, if there's any questions at all, we'll bring it up at the end for the live Q&A session. And for now, our first topic that we are going to start talking about here, this is coming from our international speakers from Malaysia here. We're very welcome for the founder of Architect Leah Cinderella Berhard here to join us here. That is Mr. Laurence Low, comes with a topic of evoking spirit of place, the Blue Mansion and beyond. Please enjoy the first topic.
My name is Laurence Low. I'm an architect and I live in Penang, Malaysia. I was trained at the Architectural Association School of Architecture in London, and I graduated in the year 1974. So I've been in practice for over 40 years. I basically do both conservation work as well as new build work. But today I will be basically concentrating on the field of conservation. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Penang, Malaysia. Before I begin, please let me express my sincere thanks to the Association of Siamese Architects for inviting me to speak. Spirit of place is the unseen, secret dimension of mature sites that convey a timeless quality. They possess an aura that draws people to them. Such sites retain and transmit a sense of well-being and belonging. The Cheong Pat Si Mansion, also known as the Blue Mansion, was such a place. When the title Evoking Spirit of Place was suggested to me, I found the proposition very intriguing because evoke translates as call up spirit from the dead, memories, or energies. Did the organizers actually select the word for this meaning? And were they provoking me? The reference to the Blue Mansion and beyond invites and inspires a fresh reiteration of the subject. The re-examination invites the question. In the light of the significant global shifts today on the subjects of heritage and sustainability, how does spirit of place underpin contemporary ideology? Can it exist beyond historic sites or emerge in new designs? I shall return to this question later. Let me first share with you the basis of what shaped my core beliefs and governing principles about conservation, and how the ideas about spirit of place that were revealed to me placed me on a new plateau that gave me a 360-degree view of the heritage world, to engage in a continuous act of self-renewal and purposeful thought creation. From within the indigo walls of the mansion, I was transported on many occasions to other equally wondrous sites that served to reaffirm my discoveries and my observations. In the process, my engagement extended by default beyond their immediate settings to global issues, placing heritage at the heart of a wider agenda for cultural sustainability. My understanding evolved through years of immersion in restoring and activating the Cheong Pat Si Mansion in Penang. And from the very beginning, I would periodically experience encounters of an esoteric and mystical nature. This told me that it would be a very special and unique place. It also charted a new course in architecture for me, one that sent me sailing into unexplored waters. As an architect, I had always wanted to understand and deep dive into the subliminal side of design and art, to assemble a vocabulary inform on my work, and to support it with an approach that gelled with my temperament, ideals, theories, and beliefs. Since my early days in architecture, I posed the question, what gives a place special meaning? In my search for a universal principle or truth to drive and develop my own path in design, architecture, and conservation, I prevailed on finding the answer. Laurence once said, "The way is without form or quality, but expresses all forms and qualities." I came across the essence of what he said when I found the cave of the 8 immortals perched on a cliff covered in mist in mountain Utzon, which is a World Heritage Site in China. I kept being drawn to Laurence's quotation, which conveys an ephemeral meaning. The more I tried to distill the essence of its meaning, the more I was left with profound impressions of what it is not. So I can only share moments and ideas that may help illuminate the concept in both direct and indirect fashions. In conservation terms, I believe that the way that is without form or quality refers to values that are intangible. The way does not remain still. It is in perpetual motion and is in a constant state of transformation. This is the spirit. The expression, forms, and qualities refers to values that are tangible. It is a physical condition that is grounded and material. This is place. The intangible and the intangible are eternally fused together to give meaning, worth, emotion, and mystery to a place. Laurence's Taoist philosophical statement still resonates after over 2,000 years. Its longevity suggests that the concept of spirit of place is a truth that defies time. The notion of spirit of place extends back to the days of the Romans when they called it genius loci, which referred to the guardian spirit or the sacred character of a place. When referring to culture, the writer Laurence said, "The most important determinant of culture, after all, is the spirit of place, the unmistakable signature of a place." The writer that is quoted most often on this subject in contemporary times is Christian Norberg Schultz, who wrote the book Genius Loci, Towards a Phenomenology of Architecture in 1976, in which he said, "The spaces where life occurs are places. A place is a space which has a distinct character. Since ancient times, the genius loci, or spirit of place, has been recognized as the concrete reality man has to face and to come to terms with in his daily life. Architecture means to visualize the genius loci, and the task of the architect is to create meaningful places whereby he helps man to dwell. It is the phenomenon that continues to occupy the minds of a variety of thinkers, including that of the geographer Utzon, who wrote, "What begins as undifferentiated space becomes place when we get to know it better and endow it with value." To the urban man, the forest is just a bunch of trees, but to the original people, or Orang Asli, as they are called in Malaysia, their ownership boundaries are as clear as day. They are marked by tangible and intangible signposts in the form of burial grounds, cultivated fruit trees, clearings, paths, natural landmarks, and spirit shrines, refreshed by way of collective memory, verbal transmission, storytelling, and myths, customs, rituals, and events, even legends from tribal wars. This cultural coding is a language of the earliest form of cultural landscape. This makeshift spirit shrine is a microcosm of the Orang Asli's world that merges with their ancestral world. This is constructed in the image of their existing living environment, complete with a ladder up to the platform that holds earthly offerings to their gods and ancestors. To the Lana people of northern Thailand, the word heritage, or moradok, is a combination of both mind and spirit, and body and form, the tangible and the intangible. The spirit always begins with a story of Mandarin splendor reborn. Blue Mansion holds a special place in time. It has been written into the annals of Spirit of Place because it has endured against great odds. It's a building that seemed destined to be lost or radically altered. In 1989, the trust that Cheong Fat Si created came to the end of its legal life. His last son, who was born in 1916, had just died. The property was put on the market. A small group of friends put a deposit down for the mansion and in time restored the building back to its original glory. The rest is history. Over the next 30 years, the site's public profile grew in stature, blessed with a mystical ability to charm every visitor of every age, size, and origin. It was a living conservation example for the public to touch and feel, to connect with the beauty of its architecture. Its presence helped create awareness and build belief. It became one of the rallying points for the heritage community, first in Penang, and then in Malaysia and internationally, especially after it was recognized by UNESCO in the year 2000. When it won the Most Excellent Project Award, the citation read as follows: "The restoration of the Cheong Fat Si Mansion is an exceptional achievement in conserving the historical and cultural heritage of the Georgetown community. History was preserved by meticulously applying extensive research on the architecture, traditional artisan skills and materials to the restoration. Imported materials to match the original as well as skilled artisans ensured the authenticity of the methodology of construction. When unattainable, necessary skills were revitalized based on research coupled with scientific analysis. The mansion's restoration has had enormous impact and influence on the preservation movement in Penang by prompting the local government to enact strong heritage preservation measures. It has stimulated restoration and adaptive reuse of structures in its immediate vicinity and serves as a model for restoration projects throughout the city of Georgetown and indeed the broader region. What endows a place with value? As more and more kudos were heaped on it, I started to ponder deeply about why and how it happened, and why it seemed to have taken on a life of its own. I started to dissect all the facts and information I had in front of me. I wanted to know what the defining factor was, what differentiated it from other heritage buildings, what were the ingredients and the attributes that imbued it with the life-enhancing, timeless qualities. If you Google today, you'll get almost 348 million results, an amazing statistic. The answer became apparent when I read a statement by the late Jeffrey Barr from Sri Lanka. I realized that the key to timeless quality is the idea that's embodied in Spirit of Place. So I returned to the observations in my journal and organized them to read as a definition, aided by other references. He wrote, "Buildings inherit meanings from their milieu and acquire meanings through use. A building grows from an appreciation of the site and an understanding of the aspirations of the client." I was given the opportunity to write an essay called "Conveying the Spirit of Place: 4 Asia Conserved Lessons Learned from the UNESCO Asia Pacific Heritage Awards" or Cultural Heritage Conservation Book #1. So I composed this. Spirit of Place conveys the cultural essence of a site. In historic sites, it encompasses the meanings of a place accrued through time and through its past and present uses. Expressed through the tangible built heritage, these intangible heritage values give the place its distinct character and aura that draws people to the place, speaks to them, engages their emotions, and often gives them a sublime experience of their surroundings. The concept may be better understood if one alludes to the notion of body and soul. The body is the physical fabric of the heritage site in its original state and setting. The soul, the spirit of place, is the sum of the site's history, traditions, memories, myths, associations, and continuity of meanings connected with people and use over time. Collectively, these tell the story of the place, generates its identity, and give it emotional impact. How does conservation of a physical structure articulate its spirit of place? Primarily, the place has to be true to its history. The truth must be conveyed in the very process of conservation itself, in the heritage site's physical form, in its contemporary use, and in its interpretation and presentation. Cultural essence means meanings accrued through time and through past and present uses. Expressed through the tangible built heritage, the intangible heritage gives the place its distinctive character, and this is exemplified by the images that I've shown you on the slide. I mentioned that the concept would be better understood if one alludes to the notion of body and soul. So how does conservation of a physical structure articulate the spirit of place? Let me go to the mansion and use it as an example. First, it starts with the architecture of the mansion, the physical fabric of the site in its original state and setting. After the mansion was restored in 1995, it proved to be a catalytic project that created awareness, altered perceptions about the worth of heritage, and soul design. It has stood the test of time and exemplifies cultural sustainability. What was the path of recovery? It was through conservation and restoration of the architecture. It was recognized by UNESCO in 2000, as I mentioned. It was accorded the highest award in the inaugural cycle. The citation that I read out to you before captures the essence of the conservation process that kick-started its journey to attaining global status. It was a paradigm Chinese courtyard house transposed to the tropics. And the design I mentioned had a major part to play in articulating the spirit of place. Its unique architecture and eclectic Penang style, borrowing from both East and West, was a new architectural statement at the time of its creation. The heritage values that it embodies lives on through the thoughtful conservation process that took place in the last decade of the 20th century. These are images of the restoration of the Qiannian on the roof ridge, a unique Chinese artisan skill. So in restoring the mansion, we looked at several issues: presentation of original form and structure, the replacement of original fabric to match the existing, use of craftsmen and artisans, preserving historical information sources, and most importantly, maintaining authenticity. This is a sample of the cut and paste ceramic shard work of Qiannian on the gable end. There was also Scottish cast iron works in the building which we restored back to the original state. Timber restoration that took place, replacement of granite pavers, there were Art Nouveau stained glass windows, all of which had to be restored using original material. So the question is still asked, how does conservation of a physical structure articulate the spirit of place? Primarily, the place has to be true to its history. It was false granite painting, gold leaf gilding, and the statement is that the truth must be conveyed in the very process of conservation itself, in the heritage site, in its physical form. As I mentioned before, the spirit of place embodies body and soul. What is the soul? Right? The myth of blue is part of the soul, the myth. The question comes often to us, was the building always blue? And the answer is yes. To repeat what I said in the definition, the soul, the spirit of place, is a sum of sites, history, traditions, memories, myths, associations, and continuity of meaning, connected with people and use over time. Collectively, these tell the story of the place, generates its identity, and gives it emotional impact. Within the building, there's a beautiful central courtyard. And the mystery of the place was ultimately exemplified by a discovery I made in the mansion itself. There is a chi point or vortex of universal energy that is located at the center of the main courtyard. Constantly unseen chi energy, as expounded by all feng shui practitioners, flows outwards from this energy well and fills the space, giving users a sense of peace and tranquility. This discovery alone was enough to convince me to devote time to understanding all forms and qualities associated with the aura of places. Choosing a site for the mansion was paramount in the mind of the owner, and his feng shui sifu was also taken into the task. It is imagined that they would have looked at many locations and would have walked the site. Fortuitously, they discovered in the early times, before the Cape of Georgetown was cleared of jungle, there existed somewhere roughly in the middle of the present property an old native prayer site. At that position, the feng shui sifu must have felt the presence of a strong chi vortex under the earth, spiraling and rising upwards and outwards into space. This chi point or energy well sits exactly at the central position of the main courtyard, which is here. The building was then laid out as a traditional three-bay Chinese courtyard house to house 3 generations in accordance with feng shui principles based on Zhong Faxi's astrological attributes. Up till today, the chi vortex can still be felt and sensed by visitors, and the mansion is continuously blessed by the presence of strong, life-enhancing energy. This imparts an aura that draws people to the place, that engages their senses and gives them a sublime experience of their surroundings. Often when questioned, visitors time and time again are unable to explain why they experience a sense of well-being, assurance, and calm when they stay in the mansion. Find the chi vortex, find the secret heart, and then build the house. This feng shui plan literally shows what is in it. Feng shui means wind and water. It is an ancient Chinese art of living in harmony with the Earth's environment and its energy lines. Zhong's sifu harnessed the positive chi or dragon's breath to moderate the layout of the mansion. For example, the manner in which the rainwater is collected is indicated by the arrows and discharged from the property, the references to main position of main doors, courtyards, windows, etc. They found that the water collection was done in a very, very unique fashion, and it was moderated to go out via the auspicious numbers in the house. But in every building, there's always the question of the person who founded the building himself. Who was Zhong Faxi? This was a tale about a sin cat, a newcomer to Georgetown. He was known as China's last Mandarin and first capitalist, China's voice consul, Rockefeller of the East, a single-man multinational. And he exemplifies the story of the mansion. He had many, many enterprises. He started the first vineyard in China, the first modern railway, the first modern bank. He was a great philanthropist who donated money to many causes, schools, temples, and churches, and hospitals. Here in the Cape of Sea Temple in Penang, he was the major donor, and to honor him, they have created a unique and special room where only his statue is situated. There's a myth about the women he loved, and his favorite woman was his 7th wife who lived in the house together with him. And there have been many, many tales about the romance of the times. There's also a myth about limited access to the house. And so when the homestay was created, the hotel was created, the myth of limited access was reinforced by ensuring that access to the building was via only a particular door and when permission had been sought. We understood that the experience of the house would be heightened through immersion, and it was very clear that the most important way to maintain the spirit of place was to maintain the cycle of life and to bring life back to what it has always been, which is what is happening at the moment. Also, when we spoke about contemporary use, we had to look at appropriate adaptation of the building. There were many, many suggestions, but in the end, in order to restore it back and to retain the cycle of life, we decided that it would have to be a place where people would live, sleep, and eat together. So it became a homestay and later on a hotel. Keeping the myths alive, we do it by creating guided tours. And we bring people into the building and we give them access to stories about the place, balancing history by sustaining the true story. So we call our guides knowledge keepers and storytellers who continue to bring stories of the place, to help people relive memories and point out to discoveries like the Chi Vortex. And then there are also the urban legends and legacies. When we first undertook conservation of the building and became clear that our mission was primarily to save the building for future generations, a lot of people donated their furniture to the place. And I dare say that it is the only hotel in existence where everything has been donated or borrowed. To continue celebrating the soul of the place, special events take place. So there are parties, there are weddings, there are celebrations, and there are events. And this continues to animate the place and keep the soul alive. Everybody wants a piece of the place. So people come and do photo shoots, they'll do wedding sessions, they'll do amazing events which continues to make the place more sought after by visitors who want to really look for Instagrammable locations. It's written about and immortalized in films and media. Let me return to the question I posed in my introduction. I suggested that the phrase, the blue mansion and beyond, inspires a fresh reiteration of the subject and invites the question, in the light of the most important and significant global shifts today around the subjects of heritage and sustainability, how does SOP or spirit of place underpin contemporary ideology? Can it exist beyond historic sites or emerge in new designs? If the expose that I've shared with you up to this point sufficiently convinces you that spirit of place has a strong linkage to understanding the quality of historic sites, and thus offering a possible reason to conserve them, then permit me to position it within the context of modernity. It is clear that my definition of spirit of place is not promoting preservation per se. That is the culture of the cult of the past. It is about living values, celebration of the present. And my belief is that living heritage can be a driver of sustainable development. So whatever the issue of place arises in any conversation, its spirit must be given consideration. On a personal level, there are 4 facets of understanding spirit of place which have enhanced my architectural design and approach: sustainability, the use of color and art, the incorporation of the Chi Vortex in new designs, and Chinese philosophy and sustainability, i.e. living values. But how do we promote the idea of spirit of place beyond the indigo walls of the blue mansion? On my suggestion, the notion of spirit of place was overtly introduced in the UNESCO Heritage Awards in Criteria A in 2004, which states the articulation of the structure's heritage values in order to convey the spirit of place through the conservation work. With the introduction, the idea started to pervade the consciousness of entrants as the awards gained traction, recognition, and momentum beyond the realm of the blue mention. But whatever the impact, the facets of the concept remains a constant part of the narrative. How does spirit of place underpin the shifts in contemporary ideology? That was my question that I asked before, right? In celebrating continuity, we had to start to look at new ideas that impinge and use the spirit of place. In the next few slides, I will be talking about what I've called spirit of place applied to design, where I use some of the discoveries in new build projects, in particular the Chi vortex, which I spoke about. Call it a bit of reverse engineering, if you wish. So if you look at Indigo, the restaurant that's up on the slide, originally we thought of using existing heritage attributes. So the features that you see in the image on the right is of the existing building. But how do we give it a new contemporary interpretation? How do you look at reversible interventions and the use of modern materials? Or how do you reuse and recycle modern materials to demonstrate local values? And so in trying to create a restaurant within the old building, we really had to look at a hybrid of new ideas. So to promote an idea of sustainability, we did several things in this design. We recycle paper tubes, which we use as part of the ceiling. We got a living heritage treasure of Penang to design and manufacture the lanterns. We recycle other materials and to be used in the building to ensure that the carbon footprint is low. So these are some of the things that we thought we could responsibly do to create new ideas within the old. And in the instance of this particular restaurant, which we have called Indigo, we really thought food represents the challenge and to renew the passion of production each and every day. And it represented the need to invent the myths of the truest of heritage, as you can see. Here, we tried to even celebrate the continuity of ideas and the myths. We recycled the carpet that's standing, that is hung onto the vertical wall against a background created by an artist. And we used the theme of a poem that I remembered reading in the garden of the fisherman's net in Suzhou, China, which said, on a full moon night, you will see 3 moons. So if you look at the photograph, I invite you to see where the 3 moons are. The food represented with a touch of the color. Another view of the restaurant using recycled materials and collectibles. To move beyond the walls of the mansion, we looked at doing a landscape garden in the side compound. And here, we really looked at how we could recycle existing materials that we had found on the site. We looked at the spirit of place and we looked at what the word itself, garden, would really constitute of. And we found that the word yuan, which is garden, was composed of 4 different characters, as you can see, a pavilion, a pool, a rock, and an enclosure. And all those things went into our design. And here we also looked at the 5 elements that are apparent in any landscape in Chinese landscaping methodology: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. All this went into the garden. And here you see as we progressed how the garden took shape. In the process of moving beyond the Windigo walls of Chongpatsi, we started to look at other historic sites. And we discovered in our exploration of the Chi vortex of energy that there was a physical representation of it if the eye could see. So here we see the presence of energy or spirit ops which gather in places where energy is strong or where there's celebration of festivals and events. And we have started to see how this would actually contribute to ensuring that the spirit of place is actually strengthened and transmitted. I mean, simple thing like if you look at the images on the right, during the 7th moon, they call it the Festival of the Hungry Ghosts. Spirit orbs actually gather in places which are, they feel very comfortable. But how do we apply it to new designs, right? So I created the modern version of the Chi Point in this house that I designed in Penang. I built the whole house around the courtyard and the main family kitchen. And if you can see from the little diagram where the circle is, the control of the house radiates from that point. From the position in the open kitchen, the mistress of the house can actually look into the dining room, through the courtyard, out into the car park, across into the tuition room, down into the living room. And we found that the Chi Point also represents what we call the epicenter of control. We tried to dismantle conventional expectations of what a house is. And we broke down the boundaries between indoors and outdoors. We use courtyards as spatial connections between communal and private spaces, as organizing elements and as environmental filters all around the Chi Point. So we call it weaving the tangible and the intangible in order to create a sense of place. The flow of the intangible weaves itself throughout the structure like the silver strands of songcat, which is a method of creating patented materials. We draw the water in and collect the energy and move it around the heart, creating a condition of balance and an aura of completion. This is the ultimate agenda in the search for identity and timelessness, applied in the modern building. Let's fast forward to the 2021. Last year, several criteria for UNESCO awards were introduced, especially in relation to the concept of sustainable development. Spirit of place still remains as one of the criteria. However, it will be interesting to see whether sustainable development actually contributes to strengthening spirit of place. In this project, which was given this special recognition for sustainable development in the 2020 UNESCO Awards cycle, this slide shows conservation methodologies and actions. They talk about co-management, capacity building, cultural continuity, community economy, and rebranding. The project developed a unique research-supported conservation methodology for the conservation of rural capital in a metropolis where conservation policies and strategies are often biased towards the urban areas. The project was carried out through the 5 conservation action areas: rehabilitating a once abandoned co-management practice of agricultural landscape, reviving the rural community through a network of development and capacity building, strengthening village governance and management structures for communities and structural continuum, building a creative and self-sustaining community economy, and rebranding rural landscape heritage. And here they demonstrate in little diagrams how these 5 conservation ideas are put together in various little systems of merging building together with landscape. But what is interesting is that at the end of it, when they put it all together, they summarized it as values and spirit of place. And this is how they started to look at how to keep the place sustainable. So they look at it as a cultural hub, where they looked at players that coming in, which would be change agents, would be the general public, which would be students, would be the consumers, and bringing off-site people onto site. But all of it captured in what they have called the spirit of place. And I think this circle of change is the most clear demonstration of how, at least to me, spirit of place has moved from being specific to a site to looking at a setting and beyond that setting. So at the end of the day, what are we looking at? How are we translating the idea of spirit of place beyond Dr. Blue mentioned. I've looked at it all and I've presented ideas, but I would like to leave you with just this last line. To experience the dimension of space and time within the breadth of history, to experience the sensation of timelessness and a sense of oneness, of the way that is without form or quality, but which expresses all forms and qualities. And to me, that encapsulates the whole idea of spirit of place and its way beyond what we see today into a wider context. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I wish you every success in your forum.
Welcome everyone back right now, ladies and gentlemen here. This is ASA Forum, and the next topic, this is also one interesting one here. We are going to talk about Jorn Utzon's Sydney Opera House, delivered by Mr. Alan Croker, the founding director of Design 5 Architects in Sydney, Australia. So just to remind everyone once again that after all the sessions are finished, at the end, we'll have a live Q&A sessions with all of our international speakers along with our moderator. So if there's any questions at all, you can chat to us via our chat box, and at the end we'll discuss that together. But for now, please enjoy this topic.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Croker. I'm an architect from Sydney, Australia, and I specialise in working with old buildings, significant buildings, not necessarily old buildings, in doing conservation, heritage conservation and adaptive reuse, also new structures in combination with conservation work. My firm is called Design 5 Architects, and we have been going for 25 years, and that's our area of specialty and expertise. I've been practicing in architecture now for 45 years, and I have been working with Sydney Opera House Trust as their conservation or the heritage conservation architect since the beginning of 2004. The Opera House has been a passion of mine ever since it was under construction, beginning in the 1960s. And to be involved with it now as the architect advising on these matters is one of those dreams that you never think would actually come to fruition, but it has. So it's a challenging project. There are lots of issues, and we have devised various ways to address those issues, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So the title of this presentation, Conserving a Modern Masterpiece, Managing Change at Sydney Opera House, is really talking about how we look after this building as a modern masterpiece, but how we manage change in the face of all of the issues and demands that are on this building. So if I can now begin, I'll just show you, this is a very brief list of the areas that we will cover. Jorn Utzon's vision and Peter Hall's completion. I'll explain who they are in a minute, why the place is important, but then how we manage change and the documents that are in place to assist us in managing change. Then I'll also talk about changes that have occurred in the past, and some of these are very dramatic changes. You may be surprised. And what are the present projects that are underway? And then a little note at the end, which is basically a warning of how we should be ever mindful of the challenges that might arise. So if I can just, I hope you can't hear this, it's raining outside and I'm in my attic studio, but the rain is softened by the insulation. The design and construction of the Opera House, it came about as a result of an international competition in 1956 for a national opera house on Bennelong Point. And there were 222 entries received from 28 countries. One of those entries was from a Danish architect, Jorn Utzon, and his design was selected as the winner in 1957. So he commenced work on the project immediately. And then in 1959, they commenced construction on site, really before they knew how to build the structure. That was quite challenging, but it was a political move. Then in 1966, when it was under construction and about the stage where this photograph is, with the shells partially built, but none of the interiors worked on at all, but he was forced to leave the project. That's a long story in itself. And then the project was taken over by a consortium of 3 architects, Peter Hall, Lionel Todd and David Littlemore. they completed the project, and in 1973 the place was opened. So from the time the place opened, there were a number of things that were changed at the building, and people just treated it as an ongoing functional building. But there was worldwide recognition that this was a very, very significant building. And in Australia, we knew it was a significant building, but that was becoming increasingly obvious with international calls for nomination for it to be listed on the World Heritage List, even in its very early stages. So in 1993, a colleague of mine, in fact, my predecessor in this present role, Dr. James Semple Kerr, was commissioned to draw up a conservation management plan to guide its conservation and ongoing use. In 1999, I was involved with Jim Kerr in drafting the second edition of that conservation plan, but it was not published because in the same year, Jorn Utzon, the original architect, who was forced off the site in 1966, he was re-engaged by the New South Wales government, and he remained re-engaged until he passed away in 2007, I think it was. In 2002, Jorn Utzon, with the assistance of a leading architect here in Australia by the name of Richard Johnson, developed the design principles for his original concept and its ongoing use, and they're called the Utzon Design Principles. 2003, then the conservation plan was revised again by Jim Kerr following this re-engagement of Utzon and was republished as the third edition. Then 2003, at the end of 2003, it was listed on a State Heritage Register. 2005, National Heritage List. 2007 was inscribed on the World Heritage List. And in 2017, I was the author of the fourth edition of the Conservation Management Plan, which is the one that's currently used. And we'll talk about that further. Now, just to explain a little bit about my passion and involvement with the place, on the left is an image that was taken in 1962 from the Manly ferry crossing the harbour on my old Brownie box camera, black and white photograph that I took of the stage one of the Opera House under construction. And then in 1970, I by then had a decent reflex camera and single lens reflex camera, and I took this photograph of the interiors and the glass walls under construction. Then in 1973, before the opening in October 1973, they had some public tours and there were also performances. So I went on a couple of these public tours and I took photographs in the house and also views across the harbour you can see here. And the spaces were spectacular. Everybody was totally blown away by this interior of this building, and its reputation really began from there. Now, a little bit about Jorn Utzon. He was an architect in Denmark. He was a young architect at the time, and his father was a naval architect. He designed boats and built boats. But he was the original architect for Sydney Opera House from the time he won the competition until he was forced off the project in 1966. It is said he resigned, but it was actually a forced resignation. And then he was re-engaged in 1999 until his death in 2008. I said 2007 before, that was incorrect. It's 2008. And then the architects who were appointed to complete the project, and they, I have to say, were trying to get Utzon re-engaged on the project after he was forced off. So they took this project on reluctantly, but they were Peter Hall on the left, David Littlemore in the middle, and Lionel Todd on the right. And Peter Hall was the architect who was responsible for the design of the interiors. He had worked in the Government Architect's Office and was an architect of some note and had done some wonderful work here. And he completed the interiors of the project to a changed program or a changed brief. And the major hall in the whole complex was originally meant to be a multi-purpose theatre, but it was altered to be a dedicated concert hall. And this is the interior that Peter Hall had done. There's a whole story about where that design came from, but I can tell you that the research we did for this fourth edition of the Conservation Management Plan confirmed that Peter Hall was doing his absolute utmost to try and continue the vision that Jorn Utzon had for the interiors of this project and to fulfill those to the best of his ability. That was not really understood until we did this research. So the concert hall is the largest space in the complex. The next largest space, what was called the minor hall, is now the Opera Theatre, the Joan Sutherland Theatre. That's the interior for it. That's also Peter Hall. And then when the building opened, there was not sufficient money to complete the forecourt properly. So the forecourt was actually a car park. And it was all covered in bitumen, and it was not a very fitting entry to the building, but that's the way it was until 1988, when, or 1987 actually, when the government commissioned the Public Works Department in collaboration with Peter Hall, the original architect for the interiors, to design the lower concourse, this spot you see in front of you here, and to pave the whole of the forecourt. And only when that was completed could we achieve a vehicle-free entry forecourt to the whole precinct and have all of these restaurants and other facilities on a lower level so they wouldn't intrude on this magnificent view of approach to the Opera House. And so now we have the forecourt and the steps and the building as Jorn Utzon originally envisaged. And you see it there in its setting, which is on the World Heritage List. And almost all of the area that you see in this image is part of the World Heritage Buffer Zone. It includes the harbour bridge, includes the harbour round. And this Opera House sits on this peninsula called Bennelong Point, which protrudes out into Sydney Harbour, giving it 360-degree views. It's an extraordinary site, and it has a history that goes back prior to the British occupation of New South Wales in 1788. But Utzon's vision for this building was that it be approached from the city or from the water, but you should approach from the city on the right of this diagram here. You go across a level forecourt where it's completely flat. There are no objects, no structures on that forecourt. And then you rise up the podium and you go up to the top of what is a man-made peninsula. And that peninsula is actually a man-made version of the rocky headland, which is immediately on the right-hand side where it says Royal Botanic Garden. And the top of that man-made peninsula and the natural peninsula are about the same. So you go across this space, which is almost like a meditation space, a prelude to the arrival experience of the house. You progress up the stairs, and when you arrive at the top of that platform, you then enter the building and you walk around the auditorium, always with views to the harbour and the context of this site. And you then turn around and you go into the auditorium, and that is where the performance takes place. And all of the performers themselves, all of the preparation, the set making, everything, all the costume making takes place within that man-made peninsula, the podium, and is then brought up via lifts onto the top of the podium where the performance is. So it's a celebration of performance. That is the whole idea of this building. It is about celebrating and elevating the idea of performance. So it's not just an architectural monument. It is, in fact, a place to house and celebrate performance. So if you were to take performance away from this structure and just have it as an architectural monument, it would lose its soul. It would actually just be a piece of sculpture without meaning. And I can tell you from experience that when you go to a performance there, then you get it. To have a world-class performance in this building and then come out from that performance onto the podium in this extraordinary environment, the whole idea of Utzon's vision comes together, and it is made really, really clear. And everybody can enjoy it. It's meant to be a place for all of the population, not just we people who live in Sydney, not just people who live in Australia. It's for the world. And there are a number of venues here, and this is just a list of all of them. The largest of our venues is the forecourt. It holds 6,000 people, and I was down there today and they were preparing for some concerts on the forecourt. because the concert hall itself is closed for a major upgrade, and that so they're holding large concerts on the forecourt just at present to allow that to happen, all within a COVID-safe environment as well. But it has huge strains on it in terms of use, 7 main venues, 8.2 million visitors a year. This is pre-COVID. When we shut down, there were none. 2,400 events a year. And then there's guided tours, there's restaurants and bars. It's a huge complex. So it actually risks being overused. So how do we manage the demands on that place? Now, in terms of managing the place, in 2002, the Utzon design principles were put together that I mentioned before, using Jorn Utzon's own words, all the stuff that he'd written from the time that he did the competition, right through to his, just before this was published. He wrote a number of essays and articles about the place, and a lot of this was compiled together to form the design principles. So that sets out Utzon's vision. And then there's the conservation management plan, which is regularly revised, updated to reflect the changing circumstances of the building, the changing pressures on the building. And that the present version is the 4th edition. It's called Respecting the Vision, and it's about the method for conserving and retaining Utzon's vision. Now, these are a couple of pages that are these are screenshots from the design principles document. And here Utzon talks about all the different principles about the building, and this page is particularly about geometry and the role that geometry plays in the ordering of the building, in its design, the way the materials are laid, the way the tiles are laid on the shelves. All of these things come from a very strict adherence to a geometric order. And then it goes right through to things like the forecourt should not be cluttered with any new buildings or any structures of any size. He gives all sorts of guidance and ideas about how you could manage pressures for new functions and new spaces. So with the Conservation Management Plan, which we just call CMP4 for short, the 4th edition, we did a whole lot of research, and particularly on Peter Hall's role in completing the project. And we then revised what was known about the significance of the place from all the different listings, and we added to that our research, and we came up with these really key points here. It's a masterpiece of 20th century architecture and a world-renowned performing arts centre. Its unparalleled design, form and inspired response to its peninsula Sydney Harbour location. It's an internationally recognised landmark, an architectural icon, a symbol of Sydney and Australia. It's a focus for national celebrations and events. It's a monumental sculpture in the round, both by day and night. And its relationship to the harbour and the city, and its approach and arrival sequence, which I described before, are fundamental to understanding. It provides an exceptional experience for users and visitors. It created a truly remarkable place, a structure that celebrates the human experience of the performing arts, as well as of the place itself. It's a performance in itself as a three-dimensional object. And this last one is a really important point. And I see this every day when I'm there, and I spent most of today there, to be honest. It has the ability to encourage and inspire the pursuit of excellence and innovation in those who use it, who are or are associated with it. All are inspired to achieve an outcome worthy of the Sydney Opera House. It doesn't matter whether it's an electrician, whether it's a person repairing a concrete patch, doing the cleaning, putting on a performance, making a set, a violinist, a dancer, all are inspired to achieve this excellence. And I see this in talking to people every day when I'm there. It's a remarkable place. Then in the CMP, we then list, this is a process that we have in Australia, and it comes from a document which you may be aware of called the Borough Charter, which is our set of guidelines and principles about how conservation planning and how conservation management decisions should be made. It's not a do's and don'ts document, it's about a process. And in this process, once we've understood what's important about a place, we then list those things that are important, which I just showed you, and then go through the various parts of the place and give them a ranking as to what that significance might be. So the roof shells, the podium exterior, the broadwalk, forecourts, all of those are of the exceptional significance. They're the most important. But the lower concourse, which is a later addition, is of a lower significance. It's a B. The covered concourse and original space is an A. And then it goes right, this list goes right through to the back of house and performing areas. So the green room, which is a very important space for all of the people who work at the house, whether they be technicians or whether they be performers or management, that's an important place where everybody comes together, and it's right on the centre line of that building. It's very important. So that's a significant space, and that's more important than, say, the corridors or the administration areas behind that. Now, the most important part of the document, and arguably the thickest part of the document, is about conservation policy. And this conservation policy is put together in a certain manner. It's a fully integrated framework, and there's three main parts of the information. There's first of all a discussion around the background and the issues. Then there are specific policies arriving from discussion, and for the sake of clarity and usability for the document, and to make it look sort of more attractive for users, the policies are put in blue boxes. And there's lots of photographs in this document too. I know from experience, don't give an architect a book with no pictures in it. They won't read it. And that goes for a lot of people. If you're going to make these documents attractive and make them usable and people want to engage with them, you have to work on the graphics of it and make it something which is attractive to use. It's an exciting thing to pick up and read a particular section on one of the venues or some aspect about the use of the place. If it's all just text, it's boring. It'd be put on a shelf. You may as well nail it over a hole in the roof to keep the water out. That's how useful it'll be. And the other most important part of this is the guidance on managing change. And here we have not graded the significance of all the little parts of the building. We have given tolerance for change tables and opportunities for change to identify any potential changes in the building. So it provides a guidance and direction for design projects, looking at change. It's not frozen. You can't say with the Opera House and a building which is particularly got the demands for operational use like this building does have, you can't say it can't change. That's not possible. If you do that, the change will go elsewhere, because change, any ongoing use requires change to keep up with the demands, whether it be changes in technology, whether it be changes in codes and compliance, whether it be change in patrons or visitor demands. All of these things require some change to occur. How do you manage those? That is the key principle. So the whole objective behind this fourth edition was about how to manage change. And then it's really important that none of these are read in isolation. You have to look at the whole lot together. Just briefly go through and show you some quick snapshots out of this CMP. This is key policies here. The world, national and state heritage values must be retained and respected and be managed into the future and protected. The primary use of the building as a performing arts centre is also to be retained and respected. So in these two policies, you actually get the apparent conflict between these two things. The building as a world-class masterpiece of modern architecture and its ongoing use. And people often see these in conflict, but they are not in conflict. They are completely enmeshed. They cannot be taken apart, because if you took one apart from the other would suffer. It would not be the place that it is without either of those things. So we have to manage it with that in mind. Then the policies go down into, this is the discussion here, there's design quality. We even talk about leases and how they are to be managed, the boundaries of leases, uses and functions externally, right down to furniture, what sort of furniture is appropriate. And some of these photographs here are put in to show things which are not working properly and needs to be managed and improved. So we haven't shied away from the problems that we have. We're trying to address those, and we just say, these are issues. We need to learn from these and do things better, and how can we improve on it? Another key thing about the conservation plan is that both Utzon, the original architect, and Peter Hall, who came after him, need to be both respected in any conservation work here. But ultimately it is Utzon's vision which is the most important of these, and Peter Hall sits underneath that. And so there are a set of policies here about how that is to be managed and how you make decisions. And only today I've been down at the house trying to work out whether we change one particular handrail for compliance issues, whether we follow Peter Hall's or Utzon's vision for these things. And these policies help us to guide this. And then there are policies there for minor changes and major changes. And if it's a major change, say one of the venues becomes unusable because of certain demands on it, maybe functional demands or accessibility demands, it could be completely replaced with a new design, but in accordance with the Utzon design principles. And then, so this is what this is about here. Utzon's concepts and design regimes must be retained and respected. So that's in considering any modification or change. And then there's hybrid Utzon hall spaces, and then there are Peter Hall spaces. One of the things that we found most difficult to manage is external events. Because when they started open slather, there were no limits on how many people this place could accommodate. And basically it was Australia's favourite outdoor venue. And there were massive concerts there. It was huge. And this is how they used to be managed. They put all of these structures on the steps, and then you couldn't see the building. This was what Utzon's vision was, but in the previous image, you could see you weren't able to appreciate that. One of the things we did in the conservation management plan is to draw up guidelines for how to manage this setting, but still accommodate major activities and events on the external areas, particularly the forecourt, but also the broad walks on the northern end and on the western side. So there are very, very serious guidelines there, and these images from the conservation management plan show the extent of those infrastructure zones for major events, how the setups can be managed. This is how we used to do the setup. This is 2008 for a concert. This is more recently, 2018, and you can see that the whole stage structure has been moved towards the southeast, excuse me, and that enables the visitor who is not going to a concert, not going to this outdoor event, can still get their once-in-a-lifetime view of this building without having all these horrible structures in front of it. And then we also had some horrible structures on the north side of the building. There's a marquee structure that was there. It gradually grew from tables and chairs with umbrellas to then be connected, and it became an outdoor venue for hire. And internally, the adjacent space, which had been a restaurant, was used for catering. In 2 years ago, yes, we revamped all of those spaces inside and we opened them up. In accordance with those guiding principles and policies that are in the conservation management plan. The marquee is gone. Now we can have venues for hire within the building, and you can have these wonderful celebratory events, whether it be an event, it might be a wedding, it could be a celebration of some major function to do with the Opera House. It could also be a public event or a conference, all within the Opera House with its own identity particular to this, but participating in the view. A very early change which happened in the building, and it was the first one that happened after Utzon was re-engaged, was the change of the reception room, which was fitted out by Peter Hall, to the Utzon room, which was, the interior was completely designed by Jorn Utzon, including this tapestry on the western wall, facing out towards the water. The whole lot was stripped and redone. So it was the first and really only complete interior designed by Utzon. Jorn Utzon also designed this colonnade, which was added to the side of the building in 2006 to conceal some new openings to a to a consolidated Western foyer for some venues which were added because of the change of use and some additional space which became available. This was when the building was still under construction. So this colonnade was very contentious at the time, still is, but it deals with shading, heavily shading the openings in the Western foyers without making the whole of this solid podium look like it's a curtain wall or an office building. More recently, an underground loading dock has been put underneath the forecourt and under the southern part of the Opera House, deep underground, and that has been since the forecourt was paved. So that's where all the major entry is. And now we have a completely vehicle-free address to the building, and all the trip hazards have been removed, and now it is really a place for pedestrians. So internally, going back to the conservation plan, each section deals with a particular part of the building or a particular aspect of it. And here we have a section to deal with the foyer surrounding the major auditoria, some photographs there describing what is happening, and all of the blue text on the right-hand side there is direct quotes from Jorn Utzon, either from the design principles or from other things that he's written. And the significance of these spaces is exceptional, level A. There's discussion about what the issues are, and then it's summarised in a policy. These are the key things that must be retained and respected. And then there are these tolerance for change tables, which look at each part of that foyer and say, okay, we have here the glass wall system, which encloses the foyers, which hangs from the shells. And we look at that in terms of what's its form, what does its form, fabric, function and location play in supporting the significance of the place, supporting this exceptional significance of this space. And the form could be changed because it's not the original design by Utzon. It was a later design by Peter Hall, and even he had some not misgivings, but he had some concerns about some of the resolution of this. The fabric could be changed. The glass is old quality glass. It could be should be upgraded really to provide better thermal performance and light protection. The function of it is really important. So that's got a 1, low tolerance for change. Its location also a 1, low tolerance for change. And then we look at all the other sections of it. There's the guardrails, etc. Their form, it could be changed, and this can be upgraded with compliance issues. So the original profiles no longer comply, but they can be changed to comply. But the most important thing is that they should be bronze. So this 1 here is to do with the bronze. That's the fabric. The function, they could change because they were just grab rails, but now they have an additional thing to do with accessibility. Their location is very important. That's a 1. So these things give us guidance for change and set the priorities for change. And all of the intrusive items are listed there. There's the things that we haven't got right yet that we can improve on. And then the opportunities for change. We could look at these lower ones here. We could provide level access between the foyer levels, because according to our legislation here, if we do not have equitable access for people with any form of mobility issue, then we are not complying with the law. We must provide equal access to all parts of the theatre. So level access compliance was not an issue when the building was opened in 1973, but it is now. And if we don't comply with this, we could risk shutting down those theatres, and we would no longer be able to use this building for its intended function. So how do we achieve this compliance without wrecking the place and still complying with Utzon's vision? And then there could be lifts, there could be tunnels. Now, one of the keys that's happening right now, the project in the concert hall, is to do with accessibility issues. So this was continuously wide stair up until February 2020, when we closed the concert hall and all its foyers for this upgrade. It will open in around February 2022. And at present, this passage is being constructed. I was in there today. It's been cut through the stair, and there's been a lot of said, this is vandalism, you cannot do this. But let's look at what Utzon proposed himself when he designed an upgrade for the minor hall, the present Joan Sutherland Theatre, which has had huge problems in terms of compliance and acoustics and function, all of those things. He designed passages at level 2, what we call level 2, at the main foyer level, and at level 3 up here. And in fact, this passage that I'm now pointing to with the cursor, that passage was in his original design, but it was built over with stairs. It was in the structure, it's buried in the structure, and it was never built. I hope you can't hear that rain outside. It's heavy rain here. And what we have done in this upgrade work, we are building a lift which connects all of the levels of the northern foyer, connects this northern passage, and allows somebody in a wheelchair or a walking frame, or somebody who's just got a bad knee and can't go up the stairs, can walk through this level. They get through to the northern foyer and they can go up this lift, which is a glass box, and they can come on all levels. They can access all the bathrooms, the bars, the lounges, everything. And I was inside this lift shaft today. It's under construction, and we're getting ready to fit the glass box and all of the bronze lift infrastructure into this framework. So in the lower levels, this is what it's going to look like, and we have had to cut through some beams here. These are huge changes, and without I was inside this lift shaft today. It's under construction, and we're getting ready to fit the glass box and all of the bronze lift infrastructure into this framework. So in the lower levels, this is what it's going to look like, and we have had to cut through some beams here. These are huge changes, And without the sort of guidance that we've had in this conservation management plan and an understanding of what Utzon's vision was, we could not have gone forward with confidence. We could not have justified what we're doing. And we might also, without understanding that original vision, we might have made an awful mess of it and really damaged the significance of the place. So these beams are now cast. They've been beautifully made. This lift shaft is here. And everything's there basically bar the purple carpet and the bronze cladding. This is in the minor theatre. This is a completed lift that opened a couple of years ago for the Joan Sutherland Theatre, and this is another glass box that comes up and lands on the top level. And I've been in this area and I've ridden this lift, but I've been in this area and seen somebody come up here in a wheelchair who's never been able to access these foyer spaces before. And they come up in this glass box, they look straight up into the ribs for the shells above, and it is quite an exceptional experience. So the type of experience that we as able-bodied people have had before now is available to everybody. So it really, what was originally intended to be the people's house, which could celebrate performance, could celebrate the engagement with performance by everybody. The upgrade project in the concert hall. On the left is the concert hall as it was prior to the shutdown, the beginning of last year. And it had these reflective, what we call donuts, these donut-shaped acrylic clouds suspended in the space for acoustic purposes, but they were never really successful. And then we trialled with full-size mock-ups another reflector system on the right using panels of folded timber and reflectors on the side, and all of this infrastructure here is to hold up these prototypes. We also tested tiered seating or tiered arrangements for the orchestra and any performers here, and we trialled a whole lot of things. And once we got everything right, we had acoustics engineers, we had everybody there. We went right back to the design principles because we had to satisfy ourselves that this was going to fit with those principles and was still going to be an Utzon space completed by Peter Hall and still celebrate performance. And all the way along, the approach to change, the main driving principle is to do as much as necessary, but as little as possible. This is a core principle that is set down in the Australia ICOMOS Borough Charter. And I'm quoting Utzon below here, as time passes and needs change, it is natural to modify and change to suit the needs and techniques of the day. These changes, however, should be such that the original character of the building is maintained. And in the center of this photograph, between those two bits of text, you can see a prototype of a new panel on the front of this box front, which is what we call a diffusion panel, and it has a ripple pattern on it in solid timber to improve the acoustics inside this hall. So all of these fronts of these boxes have been taken off, and this panel, the first parts of this are now in place. They've already been fitted. And so this is the minimum we could do to achieve this excellence in acoustic performance. So the timber remains as Australian brush box, but the form and shape of these boxes has always been an acoustic consideration. And again, it's responding to an updated understanding of acoustics. So this is the architect's CGI or computer-generated image of what the finished interior will look like. It looks very clinical, but it's still a really celebratory space. And there is another set of infrastructure which will be able to be automatically deployed for amplified performance. This is the setup for acoustic performance, i.e. orchestras or people who do not require amplification, talks and things like that. So we have now addressed all of these things, and those, I'll just go back to that last slide here, those reflectors are solid timber because we require the mass of that to do the reflection, the acoustic reflection. And putting the colour on that was somewhat contentious, but it achieves what was originally intended for these interior spaces. And this was by Utzon, he wanted to have these big tapestry curtains in these major halls. And there was a huge tapestry curtain made for the minor hall, the Joan Sutherland Theatre, and that was made, but it's since been taken down and put into storage because it was starting to fall apart. But these are wonderful pieces. They still exist. This one, the Coburn curtain for the Joan Sutherland Theatre, will be hung each year for a day or two within this space. But this idea of going into the auditorium where that's where Utzon had intended that the explosion of colour would happen, the performance was really about the space itself as well as what was on the stage. So the use of colour in these venues is very important. And now, just as a postscript, I'm just almost finished here. Recently, in 2019, the government, who owns this building, you know, it's owned by the public, the Australian public, but the government has a title to it. Unfortunately, you know what politicians are like. They think they own the building, they can do with it what they want. And the Minister for Racing wanted to project a horse race or the selection of the horses for a new horse race onto the sails of the Opera House as a light installation. And the public were totally furious about this, and there was a demonstration, which I was part of, so were all my friends there, and we all went down there the night that this projection was to occur, and we have guidelines in place to try and stop this from happening, and protesters came with their placards, and we all shone torches there to try and blank out these projections, and on the left is the press, which is covering this. And this is the Murdoch press, so it was favouring the racehorses rather than the Opera House, whereas the other press was actually favouring the Opera House. But one thing that it brought out for the first time ever was the social value that this house has for everybody. Suddenly there were thousands of letters to the press. There were articles everywhere. There were people expressing their views on radio and on television. There were demonstrations, all saying, you cannot do this. This is our house. It does not belong to the politicians. This house belongs to the public. And it was paid for by a public lottery. The public paid for its construction, not the government. So it's always had this feeling of it being a public building. And this public involvement, this public ownership of this place is probably its greatest ally, and really make sure that it will survive into the future. And we have to value that, we have to understand it, and really still be able to make the changes to the place to allow everybody to come there and enjoy it for its beauty, its spectacular performances, its architecture, everything. It's just an extraordinary place. So I'd like to end there. I find it very hard to talk about the Opera House without showing some passion for it, because I'm a regular subscriber to performances here and dance and all sorts of things here. It's just a wonderful place. If ever you come to Australia, please come and visit. And if you can, go to a performance there. Thank you.
is everyone doing right now? Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move to the next topic here, which is also one of the most interesting topics for today. We are going to move on to Heritage Returns to the Daily Life of Seoul Citizen. 600 years history and culture coexisting with the modern life. So this knowledge here will be shared by Mr. Seung Yeal You, who is the president of AA Architects and Associates from South Korea. So just to remind everyone once again that if there's any questions at all, we'll be having a live Q&A sessions at the end of the day. So you can send out your questions through our chat box and we will discuss that later on. But for now, let's enjoy the next topic.
Hi, members of the Association of Siamese Architects, students of the School of Architecture, and architects from ASEAN countries. It's my great pleasure to be with you for the Architects for 2021, which is the largest building technology exposition in ASEAN. I am Seung Yeal You, an architect practicing in Korea. Today, I'm going to tell you about 3 stories of cultural heritage in Seoul. The first story is about Seoul City Wall. The second story is about the Nam-Seoul Museum of Arts. And the third story is about the Gongpyeong Historic Site Museum. It's a story about Seoul's 600 years history. It's very interesting, both culturally and historically, that is still living in a daily life of Seoul citizen. First, I'm going to start the story of today with a map. What is the map and what does it show? By the Cambridge Dictionary, it is defined, a map is a picture that shows where countries, towns, roads, etc. And Google defines a map is a symbolic representation of selected characteristic of a place, usually drawn on a flat surface. They teach about the world by showing size and shape of countries, location of feature, and distance between places. Map can show distribution of things of Earth, such as the settlement of pattern. This is the map of Seoul in the 17th century. What does it show? It shows shape of Seoul called Hanyang 400 years ago. Shape of mountains, streams, and fine trees are expressed with the picture. Roads with red lines, and location of a palace and major government office were expressed in letter. We can understand that the Seoul was surrounded by mountains in the east, west, north, and south, and stream flows in the middle, and where palace and main government office located through the map. This is the tourist map of Seoul City Wall. It divides the wall into 6 sections and shows the location and length of each, as well as the location of a major facility, such as 4 main gates and 4 sub-gates, and also shows the location of major cultural sites located near the city wall. There are 13 cultural heritage sites and 1 natural heritage site designated by UNESCO in Korea. By period, there were 6 heritage from 3 kingdom period, days from 50 BC to 668 AD, 1 heritage of Goryeo dynasty, 5 heritage of Joseon dynasty, and 1 prehistoric site. In Thailand, 5 heritage are listed in the UNESCO, 2 from Sukhothai period, and 1 from Ayutthaya, 1 prehistoric site, and 2 natural heritage sites. Let's look at the history of Korea and Thailand after 13 centuries. In Korea, the Kingdom of Goryeo, which lasted 500 years from 918 to 1392, fell, and Joseon dynasty was founded by the King Taejo. After that, Joseon continued for 500 years until it was annexed by Japan in 1910. In Thailand, the Kingdom of Sukhothai was established in 1238, followed by the Kingdom of Ayutthaya, which was established in 1351 and lasted for 400 years until 1767. One of the important commonality between the 2 countries is the invention of the letter. In Korea, King Sejong, the first king of Joseon dynasty, invented Hangul, Korean alphabets. And in Thailand, 150 years before this, King Ramkhamhaeng, the 3rd king of Sukhothai, invented the Thai script. Next, let's take a look at the history of Seoul. First, Seoul was the capital of Baekje Kingdom for 500 years from BC 18 to AD 480. Goryeo dynasty, who unified 3 kingdoms, designated Seoul as the 2nd capital city for 500 years, calling it Namgyong. Joseon dynasty, which opened in 1392, again made Seoul as its capital, and now Seoul is the capital of South Korea. As such, Seoul has served as a capital or the secondary capital for 2,000 years in the history of Korea. As the first presentation, I'm going to tell you about Seoul City Wall. It is called Hanyang-dosong in Korean. This is the case of restoration. In 1392, the 500-year-old Goryeo dynasty fell on the Korean peninsula. King Taejo, a military commander of Goryeo dynasty, founded Joseon anew. 2 years after the opening of the country, he moved the capital to Hanyang, now Seoul. And 2 years later, in 1394, the Seoul City Wall was completed. At this time, the wall on the ridge of the mountain were built with stone, and on the ground were made of earth. In 1422, the first King Sejong rebuilt the wall that had been built out of earth with stone. And 300 years later, in 1704, King Sukjong performed a major renovation, and it took on its present appearance. King Taejo, who founded Joseon, completed the 18.6 kilometer long Seoul City Wall in the 3rd year of his reign. According to the record, about 200,000 people participated in the construction, and it was completed just in 98 days. Total 267 stones with letters are found throughout the Seoul Dosong, Seoul City Wall, as the wall was constructed by dividing a total length of 18.6 kilometers into 99 sections. Each section left a record including the participants, person in charge, place of origin, and period on the inscribed stone block. The Seoul City Wall is located in the center of Seoul, and the total length is 18.6 kilometers. The distance is about 5 kilometers from east to west, about 8 kilometers from north to south. The preserved section is 13.4 kilometers. The damaged section is 5.2 kilometers, and restoration has begun in 1975, and 12.8 kilometers has been restored to the present. 4 main gates were erected geographically in the east, west, north, and south. Among the 4 gates, south, east, north gate were preserved, and west gate was demolished during the Japanese colonial period, so you can only see it in photograph. 4 small gates were erected between the 4 main gates, of which Soimun was damaged, and Haewamun and Gwangimun has been restored. In addition to this, there has been beacons and 2 water gates. Beacons were restored and 2 water gates were partially restored as trails were discovered during the DDP construction designed by the architect Zaha Hadid. The Seoul City Wall, which had been protecting Seoul for 500 years, was greatly damaged starting in 1910 when Joseon was destroyed by Japanese invasion. In 1907, the northern part of South Gate was torn down. Dismantled of 5 arch floodgates in 1908, damage to the northern part of East Gate in 1911. Soimun was demolished in 1914. From 1915 to 1928, Donimun, Haewamun, and Gwangimun were demolished. Even after the liberation in 1945, the damage followed by the Korean government and also by the Seoul Metropolitan Government until 1972. The restoration project had begun to start from 1975. The 8.8 kilometer long wall, including 2 small gates, were restored in 1982. From 2003, extensive excavation and restoration work had started with the Cheonggyecheon restoration projects and Dongdaemun GDP work designed by Zaha. Some 70% or 3.37 kilometers of the original wall has been restored or rebuilt until 2014. The Seoul City Wall, which has been Joseon Dynasty for 500 years, was destroyed with the fall of Joseon, and it was thoroughly damaged by the government and sometimes by individuals and forgotten in the memory of the people for over 100 years. It has returned to the arm of Seoul Citizen through the restoration beginning in 1975 and has become one of the most favorite places for not only Seoul citizens but also for foreigners visiting Seoul. During the Joseon Dynasty, people used to take a walk along the city wall and appreciate the beautiful scenery of Seoul created by the changing season. These customs continue until modern times, but for the security reason, it stopped as troops stationed at the mountain of the Seoul City Wall. The Seoul City Wall tour is divided into 6 sections, including Baeak, Naksan, Hwinjimun, Namsan, Namdaemun, and Ilwangsan section, so that you can see the Seoul City Wall with the amazing surrounding landscape. The first Baeak section is 2.5 km long from northwest gate to northeast gate, with a steep slope. The view of Seoul from the Baeak mountain, which is called main mountain of Seoul, is amazing. This is the northwest gate called Chagimun. It's the starting point of this section. The wall shows that they were restored through different periods. Now the stairs and wooden deck were made for the promenade. You can see the different shape and size of stone in this photo. The Seoul City Wall was built and renovated 4 times. It is possible to know when it was constructed and repaired through the size and the shape of the stone. This inscribed stone states that in October 1804, the first year of King Sunjo's reign, Oh Jae-min headed the work to repair the wall. Lee Dong-han supervised the work. The stonemason was Yang Seung-hee. This is the north gate called Sukjeong-mun. There are 5 villages like this where inhabitants live outside and near to the wall. This section gives you a wonderful and memorable scenery of the city and mountain. Please appreciate the video from the top of the Bugaek mountain. The Naksan section is 2.1 km long from Haemun to Hwinjimun with a relatively gentle slope. It is popular as a date course for young couples as it allows you to enjoy the beautiful night view of Seoul. It is also a favorite spot for foreigners visiting Seoul. This is the northeast gate called Haemun, which is the starting point of this section. The slope is gentle and the wall with the trees and flowers inites your promenade. This inscribed stone marks the starting point of construction section undertaken by the people from Chungcheong province. In Hanyang-do-seom, Seoul City Wall, there are more than 280 such inscribed stones of various dates and type. Hwinjimun section is a 1.6 km length from East Gate to Jangchung Gymnasium. It is located in the lowest place among all the world and was built on the flat land. This is the most damaged section. Most part of the wall had been destroyed. Dongdaemun was preserved and Anghyun was restored. Outside the wall, some inhabitants of the town used the wall as their foundation and built houses of them. This is the east gate called Hwinjimun. It's the starting point of this section. A marker that indicates the location of the city wall before its destruction. This is the aerial view of GDP Dongdaemun Design Plaza, designed by the architect Jang Ha-jit. It is right next to the Dongdaemun. In the basement, many of Joseon Dynasty buildings, as like 2 arch floodgates, had been founded, and the GDP building was built above them. At the time of construction, it was pointed out by many Korean architects as one of the disgusting buildings. But now, it is one of the most visited buildings by tourists. The architect Zaha Hadid is surely one of the most famous architects in Korea as well. This is the Southeast Gate called Gwanghwamun, which had been destroyed during the Japanese colonial era and reconstructed recently. Even today, there are many houses constructed on the city wall. In the process of preparing the application for registration as a UNESCO heritage site, Seoul Metropolitan Government had plans to demolish these buildings and restore the wall, but now they are finding a way in which the past and the present coexist while maintaining their existing state. Namsan section starts from Jangchundan Park to Southgate called Sungyemun. The distance is 4.2 kilometers. The time required is 3 hours. And 5 beacon platforms were installed on the top of Namsan Mountain, which is 270 meters above sea level, which was a means of communication to inform the invasion or uprising of external enemies. The wall of Namsan Mountain was greatly damaged by the construction of a shrine by Japan in 1925. The National Assembly Building, the Anti-Communist Alliance Center, Seoul Tower were constructed on the wall after liberation in 1945. But they have been defining their appearance since 1970 through preservation and restoration. The National Assembly Building and the Anti-Communist Alliance Center, Seoul Tower were constructed on the wall after liberation by the Korean government. The beacon platform was restored on the top of the Namsan Mountain. Namdaemun section is from Namdaemun to the site of Donimun. The distance is 1.8 kilometers. It is located on a flatland, as like the Dongdaemun section had also been most damaged. Namdaemun, the first national treasure of Korea, has remained in place for 500 years, was recently burned down as a fire and rebuilt 2013. The rest in Unsan section is from Donimun site to Changmun. The distance is 4 kilometers. It is a steep granite section that is relatively well preserved and contains beautiful strange rocks. The view of Seoul from summit of Inwang Mountain is truly spectacular. This is the guy who took pictures. I visited the site several times in different seasons, in spring, summer, autumn, and winter, to watch the different view which is made by the season. Seoul, a huge city with a population of 10 million and area of 605 square kilometers, is a continuum of freshness every day, and a city where many people are busy moving and changing rapidly. However, that is not all about Seoul. Seoul is a historical and cultural city in which 600 years of thick past coexist with today's daily life. In the process of modernization, the city wall function was lost and lost its appearance in oblivion and moved away from us. But Hanyang-dosung is still in the center of Seoul. It has been revived through the excavation and restoration, continue to change throughout the 4 seasons and day and night, and still embrace the people of Seoul who visited the site. Next, I'll tell you about the second story about the Seoul Museum of Art. Seoul Museum of Art is the first Belgian consulate to establish diplomatic relations with Korea in the late Joseon dynasty in 1905. After the collapse of Joseon dynasty in 1910, several institutions come to use the building, but it was on the verge of being demolished due to the modernization and expansion of Seoul in the 70s. It was relocated to its current location and is now used as a branch of Seoul Museum of Art. The two-story Western-style building in the middle of the picture is the former Belgian consulate. The mountain on the right side of the photo is the Bugak Mountain. And there were many Hanok, Korean traditional houses around it. Unlike the previous picture of the 1920, the Hanok had been disappeared and a Western and Japanese style building were built on the site. In 1977, the former Belgian consulate was designated as a National Historic Site and decided to be moved. The whole area, including the building site, was designated as the redevelopment zone. The current location was confirmed as new site. Its removal and reconstruction followed by dismantlement of all the brick, stone, and wood. Displaced from Pyeongdong to Namyeongdong, the former Belgian consulate framework was restored according to its architectural drawing. The reconstruction was started in March 19 of 1980 and completed on August 31. The new site area was designated as a protected reserve, but it took 20 years more to revive into the Museum of Arts. Now it lives as a museum where the modern art exhibited. The former Belgian consulate or neoclassical building stands as a witness to history in its complete form, and it begins its new life as a branch of Seoul Museum of Art with today's life. The third story is about the Gongpyeong Historic Site Museum. Since King Taejo made Seoul as the capital of Joseon, Gyeonpyeongbang was the most popular downtown area and the center of market during the Joseon dynasty. There were the royal family's houses and government offices such as judicial institution and medical institution. In the process of the urban regeneration project in Gongpyeongdong in 2015, alleyways and building sites that dates from Joseon to modern Seoul period were completely unearthed. The Seoul Metropolitan Government created the Gongpyeong Historic Site Museum by preserving the city's relics and memories in their original location. The newly constructed Gongpyeong building is an edifice with 5 stories below the ground and 30 stories above the ground. Gongpyeong Historic Site Museum completely restored the remains of 3 houses and 1 alley to their original location on the first basement floor of this building. As a result of the excavation, the 4 cultural layers stretching from Joseon dynasty to the modern times were found. The first cultural layer dates from 16th to 17th century, where relics of 3 houses and alleyways has been found, maintaining in their most complete form, were transferred to the museum for restoration. The Raj House is the biggest building on earth from those sites. The building was rightly either a house of middle class or an annex of government office. As the stone base and foundation stone were still well maintained, it made it easy to identify the house was the rectangular shaped structure. The Undol Korean floor heating system, the wooden floor, and fireplace at kitchen vividly showed Korean style housing in the early Joseon period. At the center of the site, 3 alleyways, each with a width of 210 to 305 centimeters, were found. All sharing the same width, the 3 alleyways were unearthed at the same location and from all layers of soil. This is the first case to apply Gongpyeongdong rule, which are aimed at preserving cultural assets at the original location of discovery in their most complete form. First rule, architectural design that takes into account the location of a buried cultural property. Second rule, encourage voluntary participation of project operator by granting floor ratio based incentive that accords with the preservation area of the buried cultural property. Third rule suggests the guideline for the construction of a historic site museum. Fourth rule, Seoul Metropolitan Government is in charge of preservation and management of a historic site museum. Next to the relic of the Raj House, a 1:10 size model was made to reproduce its original appearance. You can experience the space of a rectangular shaped house through a projection video made using virtual reality technology. Small house, you can see the inside and outside, which was restored in actual size. You can walk while imagining the street of a Joseon dynasty in the 16th century. How exciting! Various household items, tiles, ceramics, and earthenware from the excavation process are exhibited. This is the case where the excavated cultural assets are preserved in their original location as much as possible, and incentives are given to the project developers to achieve win-win development and preservation. Korean culture now. Perhaps you have learned through K-pop, K-drama, K-beauty, K-film, K-food, and so on. Now all that, Seoul, which has a history of 600 years, with the Seoul City Wall and other numerous cultural heritage, will invite you to the most interesting journey. It is important to restore and preserve historical, cultural heritage. But it is more important to live and coexist together with them in the present life. Thank you, Kakun.
Well, how is everyone doing right now after all the sessions for our first day of the event here, or all the insights and knowledge that we have been sharing from our international speakers? This is the time we've all been waiting for the live Q&A sessions. So if there's any questions you have been listing down since the beginning, now is the time. Well, before we start this live Q&A sessions here, I just want to briefly take a few seconds of your time here to introduce, because we have an honorable moderator to join us for these sessions as well. So in these sessions, we have welcoming Dr. Montira Unakun as the moderator, which she is from UNESCO Bangkok, and she works as the programs within the Asia-Pacific region related to the safeguarding and sustainable development of cultural heritage. With a focus on world heritage, she has authored and edited publications related to heritage management and urbanism and sustainable tourism. So today, we are honored to have Dr. Montira as our moderator to join us for the live Q&A sessions. Thank you very much. We have Dr. Montira here up on the screen. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ So thank you very much to our audience and to the ASA organizing team once again. And a big round of applause at this point to our three distinguished speakers, starting from Mr. Laurence Loh from Malaysia, Mr. Alan Croker from Australia, and Mr. Seung Yeal You from Korea. I think I speak on behalf of the whole audience. And I shared one person's sentiment just now that after one of the talks, he sat in front of his screen clapping, I think, with delight after having heard one of the talks. And so there's another part of our audience that is going online to book tickets to Penang, Sydney, and Seoul as we speak. And so as soon as the pandemic is over, you'll have these hordes of fans at your office doors seeking personalized tours of the Sydney Opera House and the Blue Mansion and the Korea Seoul City Wall, I'm sure. So at this point in time, we'd like to open the floor in order to take a number of questions that have come up throughout the course of the videos. And so I'll go in turn, starting from our first speaker, Mr. Laurence Loh. There's a question that has been raised about the forms of community involvement throughout your project. Even though the project was privately undertaken, it was really seminal in changing the conservation rhetoric and practice and even legal policy framework in Penang. So can you tell us a little bit more about community involvement at the start of the project, but even as the project continues to flourish 20 years after its original restoration?
Well, there were certain milestones when we first bought the building to restore it and to save it basically from the development movement in Penang. People were actually very curious about what we were doing, because in 1990, the conservation movement hadn't taken off yet. So we told the public, we actually just bought the building, got together a few people who were of same ilk to save the building. We didn't know what we wanted to do with it, but basically is to keep it for. So over time, they saw it as a CSR project. And we said, really, we don't have very much money. And the house is empty. Furniture there was in the house, right? And so people started, I've got, and they just started contributing different things to the house, thinking that they were actually doing us a favor. And it was also at that time where development in Penang was really just getting off, so people were moving into apartments and didn't have place to place their furniture. So it began this journey of donations and loans. So we furnished the place. We actually went to different people and said, can you lend us your furniture? So in fact, 99% of all the furniture in the main building is actually on loan or donated. And really that's the community sort of participation that took part very early on in the project, right? But I think that a nice turning point, building next door was being renovated, and they were piling to put up a 22-story tower, a hotel. The heritage community, and we had a huge demonstration in front of the building, right? And in fact, we wrote to all our friends from UNESCO, if Richard Inglehart remembers, to America, to Australia, and we asked everybody to write into the government to say, actually, please stop the piling that's going on next door and try and help us save the building. So these were just a few of the community incidences that happened.
Great, thank you very much to Mr. Lowe. Now we'll hand over to Mr. Croker. There's been a couple extra questions, and so I might summarize into a joint question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about the technology that has been used in the conservation work, including the application of BIM, building information modeling software, as well as the role of teamwork, particularly in managing all the various technical consultants in a very complex setting?
Okay, very interesting question. In the conservation work, conservation is really not separable at the Opera House from what we normally do with any of the work there. So in actually planning and designing and executing any work down there, the BIM modeling system and the BIM technology is very important for us because the building has such incredibly complex geometry. Something like that is required. But I'm afraid I'm a little bit old school, and I like to turn up with the tape measure and go and look at the spaces myself. And we've had a number of instances where we've found that the BIM model has been a little bit inaccurate because it's been so difficult to get into some of the spaces to actually do the scanning. But the BIM model has been essential, particularly for understanding the services, because if we don't get the services right, then our major spaces and our functions don't work properly. So it has been a fundamental tool, and it is now being also extended to incorporate the records of what's been done in each space, particularly with conservation or what the issues might be. And they are also looking at linking the conservation management plan and sections of that with particular spaces. So when you go into the model and look at a particular space, there should be a link there which takes you back to the conservation management plan. So it's quite an intriguing system. I think, was there another part to your question that I may have missed?
And then the second part to that was the issue of teamwork. You talked about the role of, say, acoustic engineers and a variety of other people. How is that all managed?
Sometimes the meeting room was not quite big enough. So we've had consultants from all over the place. So we have a team of consultants from Europe, and the acoustic engineers, the manufacturers of the stage machinery and all the theatre equipment are in, I'm not quite sure whether it's Germany or Austria, I think it's Austria, Wagner Bureau. And then we have stage or theatre designers who are in England, and we have architects who are in Melbourne on the concert hall project. We have consultants all over the place, and we all need to be in the same room. And I've found that when the wheel falls off on some particular issue, it's because somebody wasn't included in that. And I really have to emphasize how important it is that with these larger projects, that they are not what we refer to as being put in silos, so in separate little boxes. You need to take the walls down between the boxes, get everybody together to discuss the problem, because there may be issues which are very serious conservation issues or may have very serious implications in terms of the Utzon design principles, which say an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer may not be aware of, and they're making decisions in isolation. That must be avoided. You really have to look at the whole project holistically, and with the huge teams that we've got, we have to get together, and that's how it works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Croker. And so now we go to Mr. Yu with your compelling case study from Seoul and various types of heritage-related projects in Seoul. There's a question about, can you tell us how cultural heritage conservation and contemporary new design, particularly architectural design, interface in Seoul or in the Korean context? And if there are kind of either the guidelines from the profession or from the government, and how that works in practice. Mr. Yu, maybe you need to turn on your microphone.
So, Dr. Mutira, your question is about when we renovate or rebuild the heritage building, at that time, how the new technique and new material is interfered. That's it correct?
Me too.
I'm asking a question on behalf of one of the audience members, and the question in Korea, which is quite a broad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit difficult to explain for me in English. I'll try. There are two things. One thing, as like the case of Seoul City Wall. In this case, is one of the cases to restore it in origin the form, because we do not use this facility to other function. So we try to, by research, how is the technique in older times, not at this times. When we cut the stone, for example, we do not use the modern material, modern technique. We use completely when it was done 400 years, 500 years ago. But for the case of Nam-Seoul Museum of Art, in this case, the function is different. In the older times, it was built for Belgian consulate, but now it is used for the museum. So in this case, we remodel, we change the room. For example, the room is too small for the exhibition. We made the big room unified too small like this one, and also for the windows and the heating system like this one, we use, of course, the nowadays technique. And the third case, the Gongpyeongdong historic site. In this case, it's the first time we restored like this type, because on the earth of the Seoul city, there are many historical relics. So we reconstruct for new building. We undug the ground. We can find the earlier times of the relics. For this case, there are several cultural layers were found from 16th century, 7th century, 18th century, and 100 years ago. For this case, 16th century's cultural layer was found in the form of good situation. So they decided to restore this cultural layer, include alleyways at the time and some houses. But we should construct completely new building, 5 below the level, the 30 floors above the level. So we asked to the developer to use basement floor fully to restore the 60th century's relics. In doing that, Seoul government city made some guidelines. As like first guideline, architectural design that take into account the location of varied cultural property. And the second guideline, encourage voluntary participation of project operator by granting floor ratio based incentive that accord with the preservation area of varied cultural property. And third rule, they made the guideline to construct the historic site museum. And the first rule, after the construction of a historic site museum, it is in charge of preservation and management of the historic site museum by Seoul city government. Yeah, is it good for your question, I hope?
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that gives us a more detailed understanding of the background behind those projects. Perhaps now, in the interest of limited time that we have left, I'll open the floor to maybe a joint discussion between our 3 speakers. You may remember, well, I don't remember it because I wasn't born yet, but in the mid-1960s, at the New York Museum of Modern Art, there was a famous exhibition called Architecture Without Architects, which looked at the role of vernacular architecture. And at the time it was, sort of the heyday of high modernist architecture. And so we have within our talk today, maybe kind of a good snapshot of the challenges that face us. On the one hand, we have, a globally iconic building like the Sydney Opera House, which is loved and cherished and argued about and so forth, but so very much in the public consciousness for people who are not even architects. And then on the other hand, we have sort of, the layers, centuries of history and occupation and building in a place like Seoul, some of which are sort of major city infrastructure like walls, but some of them are quite simple residential structures and neighborhoods. And then we have what is called the high vernacular, perhaps the Blue Mansion, an example of, very elite architecture from a certain historic period. So obviously, when one works at a building like the Sydney Opera House, one has maybe, Jan Utzon looking down on you, over your shoulders all the time, or you have that feeling that, eyes are very much on you as you do the work, and versus, buildings where maybe there is no architect of record, there are no historic building plans and so forth, but they're produced as a whole, as a product of, a whole tradition of building, which in itself, has a dignity and an identity. How would you, comment upon the different contexts of working when you have, an extremely well-documented, well-recognized building versus a building that has emerged in a way from a grassroots tradition? starting maybe with Alan first, and then coming to Laurence, and then Mr. Yu.
That's a hot seat. I think with something like the Opera House, where you have a singular idea by a remarkable mind, really. And I noticed the last speaker speaking about Seoul showed those images of Zaha Hadid's structure. That is a singular mind. That's not a vernacular construction. And this, I think that's the power of the Opera House, was that it was a singular mind, a singular idea, and all of the people were gathered together who had knowledge and skills who could help him execute that idea. That was fundamental to it. Because if you don't have those tradesmen, if you don't have those technicians, if you don't have those systems of design like computers, then you will not be able to do it. And I guess that's where I would see the role of the vernacular, in a sense, was the skill of the tradesman and the skill of ingenuity that was brought into that project. This was the first project to use computerization as a major design tool anywhere in the world. So it's, vernacular is one of those things that it's an inheritance. It's what we bring from our culture as a practice to construct something, and we use that knowledge which has been handed down to us to construct these things which are known to us. And in many ways, Utzon's idea brought back some understanding of this place that is Bennelong Point in Sydney Harbour, an understanding of that place which was almost Aboriginal in its execution. He brought back a celebration of that site which had not existed since the white men arrived in this country. Fairly roundabout way of answering the question, but
thank you. I think that was very interesting that you connected it with the essence of building traditions, really, and also the importance of place. Perhaps we'll go a roundabout to Mr. Yu and then end with Laurence, if you don't mind.
Okay.
How do we celebrate vernacular architecture and vernacular building tradition in comparison with more structured ways of conservation and building? Maybe that's a question for Mr. Yu.
I'd like to take an example for the case of the Seoul City Wall. In 20th century, for 100 years, Korean people had been very severe life. In the beginning of the 20th century, Korea was annexed by Japan for 35 years. Just after that, Korea had the Korean War between North and South Korea. After that, until 1917, Korea was one of the poorest country in the world. But it's recent case, the Korean people and the Korean government interested in preservation and restore the heritage. Really, the recent the cases here. During these hard times, some inhabitants lives on the wall of the city wall still now. They build a house, or they build the community building like this one. So, in demanding the UNESCO heritage to be listed for the city wall, at the first time, the Seoul city government tried to demolish this vulnerable the building the houses and buildings, but now they changed their aim. They change preserve these vernacular the houses and buildings, and the live together with this building and all the heritage. So it has changed the point of view now in Korea.
Thank you very much. So now we have the final word from Laurence. Is it easier or harder to work in a context where you don't have the original blueprints, quotes from the original architect and so forth, but you have several thousands of years of Chinese building tradition bearing upon you?
Well, I start with the premise that whether it's vernacular, whether it's heritage architecture, or whether it's new architecture, it starts with the design. It starts with the concept of design, right? So I always speak about time and space and design. And even the earliest buildings required you to design it. So I see it as a seamless timeline. In fact, once you look at vernacular architecture, there is a blueprint which has been developed over a long period of time based on traditions, users, customs, etc. Right? And so you get different variations of a vernacular building. Maybe the porch is in a different position, but ultimately the organization is still the same. So I think that is differentiates human beings from the other animal world, so to speak, you know. So design, right? And if you look at Cheong Fat Si mentioned, there was no architect, but there was a chief feng shui master who knew the principles of laying out an environment to give you perfect energy. You apply that to a modern building with the use of computers, you're almost inputting the same intuitive elements as people in the past, right? So it's actually developing our ability to design in different ways, but the process mentally is just as intricate, you know? And very new buildings, and we restore very old buildings and everything in between. And I think the advent of what they like to call parametric design and things like that, or last century, but started a long time ago. It's just that we were looking in the early days at organic forms, and we use these organic forms to inform on design, right? It's now that we have the machines to do it for us. But can you imagine that if you look at any of the sculptures, any of the structures, the cathedrals, etc., they had exactly the same intuitive mathematical ability, right? And then you filter it down to Buckminster Fuller, who wasn't even an architect, but a naval engineer. But he ended up, you know, designing something as intricate as the Sydney Opera House. It's a whole parcel, a whole, you know, bundle of the same way of thinking.
Thank you, Laurence. I think that is a perfect summary for our 3 opening sessions today, looking at design, looking at kind of design traditions that have been handed down, and sort of their culmination into a present-day contemporary architecture. So we'll continue our conversation tomorrow. We're lucky to have Laurence, Alan, and Seung Yeal join us again for the closing panel discussion. And so now I'd like to thank you very much. Thank the audience for your continued participation, and then hand the floor back to the ASA forum team.
Okay, thank you, Montira. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
See you tomorrow.
We enjoy it.
Thank you very much, everyone, once again. But don't go anywhere. I think this is a very memorable picture that we have on the frame right now, that all four, three of our international speakers and our moderator on the screen. So I think here for our online platform this year, it's a new normal. So let's take some photos together with all four of you on the screen. So the best thing I need you to do for me is give a big smile, and I'll have my photographer up here taking lovely photos of all four of you. We'll just take a few seconds. Yes, that's the kind of smile I want from everyone. Okay, great. Everyone is looking very, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of our international speakers and our moderator. Thank you once again. And as we mentioned that today has coming to an end of our first day of our ASA Forum 2021. And I hope everyone had all the great insight and all the knowledge that has been shared from our international speakers and our honorable moderator as well from the live Q&A sessions. Just to remind you, tomorrow, one more day for our conference where everyone can join us. All three channels that you can join us, you can log on to the website from worldwideweb.asaexpo.org/forum-2021, where on that website, you can use the same password and the same username. And don't forget that all the handouts and the documents will be available on the website itself. Not only that, you can also use your Facebook. Log on to Facebook at facebook.com/ASA Architect Exposition. That's another way to join us for this conference as well. And one last channel, you can also log on to YouTube. So search for ASA channel and you can enjoy the conference as well. For tomorrow, don't forget that we have special highlights even waiting for everyone for the panel discussions, when we also have session E, session F waiting as well. And it starts same time. We start from 2 p.m. until 5 p.m. going onward. So we wish to see you again tomorrow, and thank you very much from all of our supporters. Thank you to all of our participants that are watching from all over the world. Well, have a great evening for all of those in Thailand and in the same range of area here. See you tomorrow. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ